Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to try to answer a question that has fascinated historians for centuries.
Okay.
How did ancient China manage to achieve
Right.
and maintain unification for so long? It's really a remarkable story.
Yeah, it is.
You sent over an excerpt on the rise of the Qin dynasty, and it highlights some...
Well, imagine a weapon that requires less strength and skill to operate,
Okay,
making it much easier to train large numbers of soldiers.
right.
The crossbow's mechanical mechanism holds the string taut,
Okay.
so you don't need years of archery practice to become proficient.
So you're telling me that with the crossbow,
Yeah.
even someone with minimal training could become a relatively effective soldier.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't that completely change the dynamics of warfare?
Absolutely. The crossbow lowered the skill barrier for military participation,
Wow.
allowing rulers to tap into a vast pool of manpower.
Yeah.
The common people, instead of relying solely on a small elite force of highly trained archers,
Yeah.
armies could suddenly field large numbers of crossbowmen.
But wouldn't a larger army,
Right.
especially one composed of less experienced soldiers,
Sure.
be more difficult to manage and control?
Uh-huh.
Didn't that create new challenges for rulers?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And it's where we start to see the ripple effects beyond the battlefield. Managing these massive new armies required more sophisticated bureaucratic systems. Rulers needed ways to track, train, equip, and feed all these soldiers,
Right.
leading to significant organizational changes.
Yeah.
The crossbow, in a sense, pushed ancient China towards more complex forms of governance.
So we're already seeing how this one invention
Right.
is driving changes not just in warfare,
Mm-hmm.
but also in how society is structured.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder if similar patterns played out in other parts of the world.
You're right to make that connection.
Okay.
The introduction of firearms in early modern Europe also led to shifts in power structures and the formation of strong centralized states,
Right.
much like what we're seeing with the crossbow in ancient China.
It's incredible how a seemingly simple technological innovation can have such far-reaching consequences.
I know, it's fascinating.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
Sure.
our sources also mentioned a philosophical group called the Mohists. How do they fit into this story of crossbows and empires?
This is where things take a fascinating turn.
Okay.
The Mohists, known for their pacifist philosophy,
Right.
were also masters of defensive warfare and siege tactics.
Really?
And guess what their weapon of choice was?
Don't tell me
Yeah.
the crossbow.
You got it. It seems paradoxical.
Right.
Pacifists who are also experts in military technology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The source material paints a picture of a pragmatic group grappling with the realities of a chaotic era. The Warring States period was a time of constant conflict.
Right.
And the Mohists,
Yeah.
despite their pacifism,
Right.
believed in defending the innocent from aggression.
Yeah.
To do that effectively, they needed to be adept at using the tools of war,
Yeah.
including the crossbow.
Yeah. So they saw the crossbow as a necessary tool for defense,
Yeah.
even within their pacifist framework.
Mhm.
Did their philosophy influence how they used the crossbow
Yeah.
or how they thought about warfare in general? What's fascinating is that the Mohists' pacifism may have actually contributed to the crossbow's effectiveness
Okay.
as a tool of social and political change.
How so?
They believed in a meritocratic system based on virtue and talent, not just social status.
Okay.
This aligns perfectly with the crossbow's potential to empower individuals based on their skill and courage,
Right.
regardless of their background.
Are you suggesting that the Mohists,
That's possible.
despite their pacifist ideals,
Yeah,
might have inadvertently paved the way for a more powerful and centralized state
just thought.
by promoting the use of the crossbow and advocating for a meritocratic system?
It's a complex and intriguing idea,
Yeah.
and it's at the heart of what the source calls the crossbow conjecture.
Okay.
To understand this conjecture, we need to delve into the specific historical context of the Warring States period and how the crossbow might have influenced the rise of a particular school of thought in ancient China.
Legalism.
Legalism.
Yeah.
That rings a bell.
Wasn't it all about
Yeah.
strong, centralized rule, strict laws,
Right.
and a rather pragmatic view of human nature?
Yeah.
It doesn't exactly sound like the most cuddly philosophy.
You're right. It wasn't known for being warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
But if you think about it,
Okay.
the rise of legalism aligns with the changes brought about by the widespread adoption of the crossbow.
Okay.
Remember, rulers now had the ability to mobilize huge armies of partners, They needed a system of governance that could effectively control and direct this newfound power.
Right.
And legalism provided just that.
I see what you mean.
Right.
Legalism, with its emphasis on order and obedience,
Yeah.
could be seen as a response to the social and military changes triggered by the crossbow.
Right.
It's like they needed a new political operating system to manage a
I
society
think that's a great way to put it.
that had been redefined by mass mobilization.
And it wasn't just about control.
Okay.
Legalism also emphasized meritocracy.
Rewarding those who serve the state effectively, regardless of their social background.
Yeah.
This fits with the idea of commoners rising through the ranks based on their skill with the crossbow, a weapon that could elevate individuals based on merit rather than birthright.
So we have this intriguing possibility that the crossbow,
Right.
by changing the dynamics of warfare, also helped shape the very philosophy that would ultimately underpin the unified Chinese state.
It did.
But where does that leave the Mohists?
Right.
Their pacifist ideals seem to clash with the legalist emphasis on control and military power.
That's a crucial point.
Right.
And it gets to the heart of the tension between different visions of society and governance in ancient China.
Okay.
The source highlights how the Mohists, despite potentially playing a role in creating the conditions for unification, ultimately saw their influence wane as legalism gained prominence.
It's almost like the Mohists planted the seeds of their own marginalization.
Yeah, in a way. They helped create a system that in some ways ran counter to their core values.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a pretty tragic irony, isn't it?
It does seem that way.
Yeah.
Their emphasis on universal love, pacifism, and a meritocracy based on virtue didn't quite mesh with the Qin dynasty's focus on power consolidation and strict legal control.
So the rise of legalism and the unification of China under the Qin dynasty ultimately led to a decline in the Mohists' influence.
That's right.
Their ideas, while influential for a time, were eventually eclipsed by a more pragmatic and authoritarian approach to governance.
Exactly.
So in a way, the story of the crossbow and the Mohists is a cautionary tale about the unintended consequences of technological and social change.
It is.
Even those who contribute to those changes don't always get to dictate the final outcome.
That's an important insight. It reminds us that history is rarely straightforward. And that progress often comes with unforeseen consequences.
Right.
The Mohist story is a reminder that even well-intentioned actions can have unexpected outcomes.
Right.
And that the path of history is shaped by complex interactions between technology, ideology, and the ambitions of those in power.
It really makes you think about the forces at play behind major historical shifts.
Yeah.
We often focus on great leaders, political ideologies, or grand historical forces.
Yeah.
But this deep dive suggests that seemingly simple technological innovations, like the crossbow,
You got it.
can play a far more significant role than we might initially realize.
That's exactly what makes this deep dive so compelling.
Yeah.
It challenges us to think beyond the traditional narratives and consider the often subtle but profound influence of technology in shaping the course of history.
We've already uncovered so much. And it's incredible to think that we've only just begun to explore the source material you provided.
There's so much to unpack.
It mentions something about ancient Greek engineering and the invention of the steam engine. That sounds like another fascinating story waiting to be told.
And that's precisely where we're headed next.
Okay.
We'll be diving into the story of Hero of Alexandria and his invention, the eolipile, a device that harnessed the power of steam centuries before the Industrial Revolution.
Wow.
It's a story that reminds us that the seeds of progress are often sown in unexpected places and at unexpected times.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've just uncovered how a seemingly simple weapon like the crossbow might have laid the groundwork for major social and political shifts in ancient China.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
How these things can have such a ripple effect for centuries even.
Exactly.
Now get ready for a journey across continents and centuries.
All right, I'm ready.
Our source material takes us to the ancient Mediterranean world,
Okay.
where we'll meet a brilliant inventor named Hero of Alexandria.
So this is ancient Greece we're talking about.
What's fascinating about Hero is that he lived during the 1st century AD,
Okay.
a time when the Roman Empire was at its peak.
Mm-hmm.
Yet he designed a device
Yeah.
that seems to belong more to the Industrial Revolution than to the ancient world, the aeolipile.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity.
Okay.
What exactly was this aeolipile, and how did it work? Was it some kind of ancient Roman robot?
Not quite a robot,
Okay.
but it was ingenious nonetheless.
Okay.
Picture a hollow sphere filled with water,
Mm-hmm.
mounted on a pivot.
Okay.
2 curved nozzles protrude from the sphere,
Look like-
allowing steam to escape.
Right.
As the water inside is heated,
Yeah.
it turns to steam,
Okay.
and the escaping steam creates a force that spins the sphere.
So it's essentially a steam-powered spinner.
You got it.
I can see why you said it seemed ahead of its time. But if Hero understood the principles of steam power nearly 2,000 years ago,
Well,
why didn't it catch on?
Well-
Why didn't it revolutionize the ancient world the way it did centuries later?
that's the million-dollar question. And it gets to the heart of how different societies perceive and utilize technology.
Okay.
Our source suggests that while Hero's aeolipile demonstrated the potential of steam power,
Mm-hmm.
it was viewed more as a curiosity,
Really?
a clever toy,
Wow.
rather than a practical tool.
It's almost as if they couldn't see the forest for the trees.
Right.
They had this incredible technology
Yeah.
with all sorts of potential applications,
Right.
but they just didn't grasp its significance.
Mm-hmm.
Was this a failure of imagination on their part?
It's not so much a failure of imagination as
Yeah.
a reflection of their social and economic context.
Okay.
Remember, this was a society heavily reliant on slave labor.
Right.
The idea of machines replacing human effort simply wasn't a priority.
That makes sense. If you have a readily available and inexpensive source of labor,
Right.
why bother with complex machines? Especially if they're seen as mere curiosities.
Uh-huh.
But surely Hero, being a brilliant inventor,
Yeah.
must have seen the potential applications of steam power beyond just spinning a sphere.
Absolutely.
Okay.
His writings reveal a deep understanding of pneumatics and mechanics.
Wow.
His book Pneumatica
Okay.
explores the properties of air and steam
Mm-hmm.
and even outlines the principles behind siphons and pumps.
Really?
It's clear that he grasped the potential of these forces.
So he had the theoretical foundations,
Yeah.
but the social and economic conditions just weren't ripe for a steam-powered revolution.
Right.
It's a classic case of technology being ahead of its time.
It is a classic example.
But what happened to Hero's ideas? Did they simply fade into obscurity after his death?
What's remarkable is that Hero's writings survived,
Wow.
even as the Roman Empire declined
Right.
and the ancient world transformed. Centuries later, during the Renaissance,
Mhm.
his work was rediscovered,
Really?
inspiring a new generation of inventors and engineers who were finally ready to harness the power of steam.
It's amazing to think that a seemingly insignificant invention from the 1st century could have such a lasting impact, planting the seeds for a technological revolution centuries later.
It really is remarkable.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive,
It have.
from ancient Chinese battlefields to the workshops of ancient Greece.
It's been quite a journey.
It seems that our exploration of the crossbow and the aeolipile reveals a recurring theme,
Okay.
the complex
Yeah.
and often unpredictable
Yeah.
relationship between technology and society.
Exactly.
We've seen how seemingly simple inventions can trigger chain reactions,
Uh-huh.
leading to changes in warfare,
Right.
social structures,
Yeah.
and even the way we think about power and governance.
Absolutely.
And sometimes those consequences take centuries to unfold.
That's right.
It's a reminder that technology is never just about the tools themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the choices we make,
Yes.
the values we embed in them,
Mm-hmm.
and the unintended consequences that ripple out from those choices.
Very true.
This deep dive has certainly given me a new perspective on how to think about the technology shaping our world today.
And that's perhaps the most valuable takeaway from this exploration.
Yeah, I think so.
The next time you encounter a new technology,
Okay.
don't just marvel at its capabilities.
Yes, sir.
Ask yourself, what kind of future is this technology shaping?
Right.
What role do I want to play in that future?
Mm-hmm.
The answers to those questions are ultimately up to us.
That's a good point.
After all, we are the inheritors of a long legacy of innovation,
Right.
stretching back to the inventors of the crossbow and the aeolipile.
Yeah.
It's our responsibility to carry that legacy forward,
Mm-hmm.
shaping a future where technology serves humanity's best interests.